this. I left the city, I've been browsing, treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 47 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. We have a fantastic guest on tonight, but before we introduce him, and I see he enjoyed the intro music. It's a little bit of a banger there, so thank you to Maddie Big Chest for that. Little bit of family business here. We were talking about giving away the Scott Fishbowl spot for you guys tonight. Smash Accept John could not be here, so he really wants to be involved with that. So we are going to move that to tomorrow, a little special 10-minute segment. And, I know a lot of you guys, we got over 400 responses of you guys sending in, your chance to be in the Scott Fishbowl. It's a fantastic tournament. And I know we're going to make you wait another day. That's messed up. But we're excited, and we want to get as much content in with our guests tonight. It's almost like Christmas telling your kids, hey, guys, just wait till tomorrow. We'll get it going there. But before we introduce our guest, Mung, how you doing tonight?
Hey, doing good as always. Kind of perfect timing. I just have my top 200 redraft PPR rankings drop on Fantrax earlier today, which is going to lead in perfectly to what we're going to talk about tonight. A little bit more of a redraft focused show today.
A completely redraft focused show. We're all about Dynasty trades, but tonight we have the lead analyst at Pro Football Focus, host of the Pro Football Focus Fantasy Football Podcast. Literally no one we'd rather be talking on here. No one's trending more than Gio Bernardi's quads than this man, Ian Hartitz. How you doing tonight?
Helping intro. Doing good. Thanks, guys. Yeah, man. Dynasty is always a good time. I'm getting more into that in the recent years as well. But, yeah, certainly always keeping the attention more and more at the 2021 slate. But, it's always good to have a little bit of a long-term viewpoint in it as well. But, yeah, man, excited to get into it. And I'll be interested to see where, some of the bigger discrepancies are between redraft and Dynasty guys. It's crazy, man. If you go back, even 3 years, like I was talking to my guy earlier on the Wolf podcast, and, we were just talking about Todd Gurley, calling him, Todd Gurley's corpse at this point, which is fair. It's a true, mean point to make. But 3 years ago, this dude was on top of the freaking world. Even 2 years ago, he was still an RB1. Now he's only 26 years old. Might as well be 45 in fantasy football land. So it's crazy how things change. And if you don't, really make sure you sink it in, you'll be missing on it. So excited, guys. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. We're going to jump right in first to we're going to go over your tiers. I noticed that you listed your 100 questions for 100 days out, and then you also released your tiers. And we're going to kind of go over all of your tiers. We're going to start with quarterbacks. We have tier 1, you have Mahomes, Allen, Murray, Prescott, and Lamar Jackson. Now in Dynasty, the biggest thing is always tiers. Where do we move? Who's in what? And right now, it's Mahomes, Josh Allen's moved in there. And is the gap between Mahomes and everyone else closing? I mean, Josh Allen was clearly the QB1 last year, Lamar Jackson 2 years ago. If you're drafting right now, talk to me a little bit about the dichotomy of how that breaks down.
It's just wild because Mahomes is really the only one out of this group that has put together two just exceptional fantasy seasons. 2019 was pretty great as well, although he was a little bit more banged up. But 2018 and 2020, we just saw, the high-end version of him. And I believe they're both in the top 10 highest scoring fantasy seasons ever. These other guys have at least threatened that. Josh Allen last year, absolutely spectacular. Guy scores 8 rushing touchdowns every year. It's crazy. I don't know if he's going to keep doing that forever, but at least for now, we're looking at one of the most fantasy-friendly QBs in the league. In that Buffalo Bills offense. Kyler Murray was actually on pace to be the top, him and actually Russell Wilson as well. If you just looked at the first 9 or 10 weeks of last year, before Kyler got that shoulder injury that kind of limited him, man, those fantasy points per game were flying. So Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, those are actually our top 2 guys in single season fantasy points per game ever. Lamar number 1 in 2019, Dak in 2020. So to me, Josh, Kyler, Dak, and Lamar, they've all flashed the ability to be basically what Mahomes has been twice. So yeah, I'd still Patrick Mahomes number 1 for me, but there's a reason why they're in the same tier. I could see each of these guys finishing as the overall QB1 without, too much craziness going on.
Now, Mung and I have an opinion on this, but if you had to pick one, you're just saying this is the guy that's the QB1 this year. Obviously Murray was from weeks 1 to 11. Lamar was 2 years ago. Allen just was. If you had to pick one guy, this is the guy that's going to be QB1 this year.
It'd be Mahomes. Other than Mahomes, I would say Lamar gets back to it. The rushing upside is just too crazy. Getting Ronnie Stanley back is going to be great. And I was reading a good piece over at PFF.com from my guy Seth Galena talking about how Rashad Bateman, Tylan Wallace, like they finally might give Baltimore some of these like receivers on the outside that can just win against man coverage. Because, as much as people like to pick apart Lamar's, passing ability and stuff like that, if you look at this team, they've been a bottom 3 spender on the offense each of the past 3 years. Like, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, there's some okay guys, but let's get him an actual difference maker on the outside. I hope Rashad Bateman is that guy.
I absolutely love it. Our guy Dave Kluge, who's in the Smash Accept, he's blowing up over at Football Guys, and he was the guy saying Lamar Jackson is that QB1 this year. He's definitely in that range, and in Dynasty, he's kind of been faded a little bit, and it's crazy because we have that post-hype sleeper. He goes from QB1. He still finishes as a top 10 QB, and now all of a sudden everybody's like, let's discard him. Let's move on to the next group. And I'm glad that you have him in tier 1. Mung, any questions you have in that tier 1 range?
No, I'm with Ian. I still have Mahomes as my number 1 guy. We're talking about the best offensive line he's ever played with this year, so certainly could have even more deep shots to Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman. And then personally, my number 2 is Dak Prescott. Dallas didn't do anything to address that defense, so he's going to be chucking it a ton. But all these 5 guys I could see an argument for.
Yeah, now it gets a little bit trickier, so you got a couple young up-and-coming sophomores, looked fantastic. You got Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, and Jalen Hurts. Now, my guy, I'm an Eagles fan, and I'm glad that you have Jalen Hurts up here because I'm buying him everywhere in Dynasty. Because I'm doing it because I'm a volume trader, so I like to sell when it gets hot. And what I seen from Jalen Hurts, he's got that Konami code. We put together some things here. Explain to me why you have him in tier 2. So many people in the industry have him considerably lower, outside that top 12 range.
Yeah, I was actually just writing about Hurts today a little bit, and I think he's fair here. I'm surprised to see kind of the discrepancy in his ADP between some of these different sites, and I would say Underdog's probably the sharpest right now with most people doing best ball at this point over Redraft. But like I just got a hold of some sleeper Redraft ADP, and Hurts was going as the QB 16. Like I was mocking some people for pretending like this dude is a late round quarterback, so I thought it was pretty consensus he was in the top 10, but I guess not. Everything we saw from last year tells us the guy is a QB1. He had 4 starts. He was the QB 11, the QB1, the QB 12, and the QB 20 in 3 quarters. He was on pace. If you just take the 4 games, the 4 starts, small sample size, but like he was running so much, his 16-game pace would have been more than Lamar Jackson ever had in a single season. He's not Lamar, but he looks fine throwing the ball, even if he graded out pretty poorly. Read very poorly, like the 4th worst quarterback I think we had, the 44 guys. Again, as I was going through this article, I could not believe how many offensive line injuries they were dealing with. And, it was a point that was brought up, but it was just like I listed 3 of them. I found 3 more. Andre Dillard missed the entire season. Brandon Brooks missed the entire season. Jason Peters missed 8 games. Lane Johnson missed 9 games. Like just one guy after another. And who the hell was he throwing to, man? Like the same kind of arguments that were really given to a pass on, I think also applied to Jalen Hurts as well. Not that anyone's coming out Hurts' neck or anything like that, but I just think it was such a bad situation in Philly for him to go into last year. And in fantasy, he made up for it because he runs a shit ton. So as long as he keeps that going, which I will, I think he's going to be just fine. It's a little bit of an arbitrary number, but if you just look at quarterbacks that have at least 100 rush attempts in the season, and again, he was on pace for 184, so 100 is very conservative. Out of the 22 instances since 2010, 15 of them finished as a top 8 fantasy QB. And then I even dove into, the 7 that didn't. And we really only have like 2 or 3 examples: 2020 Cam, 2014 Colin Kaepernick, 2011 Tim Tebow. Those guys like really just didn't. They were not QB1s. But the other guys, 2018 Lamar Jackson, Tyrod Taylor, Kendon's the other years, they were usually top 8 whenever they were actually on the field for the portion of games they were in the lineup. So there's not many like true cheat codes we have in this glorious game we call fantasy football, but rushing QBs are one of them. Jalen Hurts might just do it more than anyone else.
Yeah, I love it. And in Superflex, he's a guy that you can get. I love getting my second quarterback being a high upside guy, and then when I get my third guy, I try to get a nice floor, a Kirk Cousins or something like that. But Jalen Hurts, I've been buying him. You guys, I've been talking about it in Dynasty recently, just bought him I gave up Kamara to get Antonio Gibson and Jalen Hurts, in Superflex. Those are the kind of moves that can, a lot of people are worried about the risk, the long-term ability. But once we start playing, once the week 1 kicks off, we're all playing redraft, right? Like up until we start losing, we get to week 5, we're all playing for that title. We're all playing in that same direction. And I love that. Talk to me a little bit about, Devonta Smith is coming in now. He didn't have that weapon. Now he does. Another guy that, I was pumped. The Eagles messed up with Rager, in my opinion. They messed up passing on DK Metcalf. Did they finally get their guy?
I think so, man. I did not it was funny. I was on a show earlier this week where we were looking at just kind of the values. And so I just took my rankings against ADP to see who I was just a lot higher on or lower on. And I got Devonta Smith as my wide receiver 25 right now, which I thought was fair, but he's like wide receiver 37 over at Underdog, man. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, I guess I'm, in the front seat of the Devonta bandwagon here for 2021. He could have 150 targets this year and it would not be crazy at all. He is the undisputed number one in that offense. We heard that Jalen Reagor moving to the slot. All that told us is that Devonta is going to be their featured guy. And why the hell wouldn't he? He just took over the entire freaking country in college football last year. So, man, we can talk about the size being an issue, but where's it at? It's not a concern for Jalen Waddle because of 15 pounds, even though Devontae's taller. In today's age, in 2021, size just does not matter, even comparatively to how things were 20 years ago. Yet every single stat you hear about, the weight being an issue, usually references the last 30 so years of players. So, we could always just go back with all those stats, high passing stats. Oh, there's been so-and-so 5,000-yard passers the last 30 years instead of 10. It just seems like everyone's kind of going out against this guy because of the weight, and I just don't see it being an issue. So if you look at the offense, there's targets galore. Good note from my guy Josh Norris in one of his podcasts he had over at Underdog is that this also does not plan on being a bottom 5 offense in terms of total pass attempts. So if we can get just Devontae really featured as that alpha number one that he looks like he is, ceiling's the roof.
I love that. So the veterans here, Mung, I know with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, you definitely have some questions, going into 2021. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, not so much questions. It's probably a little bit nitpicky. Personally, I have Tom Brady and Joe Burrow above Rodgers. I'm just a little bit concerned that, he saw that career high in touchdown rates and in completion rate last year. So expecting a little bit of regression there. And overall, I think, Brady and Burrow just have better surrounding casts.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last year when they drafted Love. Aaron Rodgers was going to be on an up yours tour, and he really was, and now it sounds like he's still going to come back. Green Bay's come out and said basically they're not going to trade him. Basically with what you're looking at there, talk to us a little bit about Aaron Rodgers and what you're seeing for this year.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things with the regression. I hear you. You can look at the list of quarterbacks that had, over 7% touchdown rate, and they all came back to earth because it's that hard to be that freaking good again. But I don't know that we can just take him out of the, top spot because he was also that good last year. So even, a decrease, we will usually see, kind of an increase in the volume after these sort of insane years. I wish there was more, just on-field products in Green Bay to make us feel better about it. That's why I wasn't on Rodgers last preseason. All we had was the pissed off Jordan Love angle because they hadn't added anything else to the offense. And Rodgers, one of the things he was saying early in the year is that, a down year for him is still a career year for a lot of other quarterbacks. And he's right. But at least in fantasy, man, in 2019, he was coming off a year. I think he was the QB 14, either overall or in fantasy points per game. So he really was more of just a guy that wasn't, exactly going to run any more often. So last year did come out of nowhere. But, with Burrow and, more concerns about him rushing or popping up. I like him a lot. He's only 2 spots behind me, and I have Brady right there. So they're next to each other, even if I did separate it by the tier. I guess with Brady, his arm was not a noodle last year. I hated that storyline the entire time. But at some point, Father Time has to come. I just feel like at 43, 44, wherever the hell he is now, it's absolutely ridiculous. So I just can't wrap my mind around him actually continuing to get better. But maybe he will in the second year in Bruce Arians' system because we know it can be that difficult. So yeah, we're talking just difference of 3 or 4 ranks here. All top 10 QBs, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, just give me Rodgers because out of the 3, he was the best one last year.
It's truly remarkable what Tom Brady's able to do. I just turned 40 last month. They had a roast on here. They all made fun of me. And every day since then, I'm waking up with back pains and feeling a little bit different. I feel like they all kind of jinxed me on that. So going from the old to the young, I mean, obviously we'll move to tier 3, and we got Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Ryan Tannehill, Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan, and Baker Mayfield. The one that I'm seeing get disrespect that just blows my mind is Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is like the most criminally underrated. Him and Stafford, people always overlook him. And I mean, we're going to talk about A.J. Brown and just gush about him later, but Tannehill just goes out and gets it done week in and week out.
Yeah, man, like he gets really disrespected as this like kind of post-Gase breakout guy. Like he was really good in Miami before Adam Gase got there, and then he kind of got ruined a little bit. And then thank God the Titans went back and saved this guy because he's been nothing other than a top 10 QB ever since he took over the job. And we were all, kind of a little bit expecting him to crash back to earth last year, and he didn't at all. He honestly looked better than ever. So right now, yeah, it's not ideal they didn't replace Corey Davis and Humphreys better than they had. But God forbid they bring Julio in like a lot of people are thinking they do. Like, my goodness, man. But we have a guy, every single broadcast, one of those things, Fitzpatrick went to Harvard. Tannehill used to play wide receiver. We get it. He's more athletic than usual. But it really does matter, man, for him to have 11 rushing touchdowns in 28 games with the Titans. Like, I don't think it's a fluke. Like, they use him near the goal line to run. He's more than capable of doing so. And much like Russell Wilson, like as much as the Titans and Seahawks might want to run, like look at those defenses. I don't think they're really going to be able to slow down anybody enough to instill their will as much as they might like to. So Tannehill was the QB7 last year. He's like the QB16 an underdog right now. I can't believe it. Like I wrote an article on Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I was so ready just to call him my, number 1 late round QB of the year. But there's Tannehill sitting there at QB 16. I have him, QB 11 or 12 or whatever it is. And yeah, man, like go get this guy. He is so cheap, and AJ Brown's a screaming value in a lot of these second rounds. And particularly if you are trying to stack it up in best ball, like get Ferkser even later. Titans are awfully affordable for a team that was just, I think, the number 4 ranked scoring offense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as QB7, while we're still on Tennessee, Corey Davis leaves, Adam Humphreys leaves. Over under 150 targets for A.J. Brown. I know you're the redraft guy. I love following you on Twitter. You're hilarious. Like, I love reading your articles, and you've been on A.J. Brown forever. And I know last year, like right around Christmas time, I was like, yo, A.J. Brown is like leaning towards my wide receiver 1, and I caught a lot of beef for it. I just saw the writing on the wall, and then Corey Davis leaves, and now all of a sudden it's like, dude's going to get peppered.
If Rodgers does end up getting traded, like I'm moving A.J. Brown ahead of Devontae Adams. He's just at my wide receiver 2 spot right now, assuming Rodgers is staying. But, man, like it's 150, particularly in 17 games as well. I do think that 150 is certainly on the table. But it's just insane, man. We've really never seen him bust whenever they've even given him just an ample amount of targets. I believe he's 30th or 33rd in just total targets among wide receivers over the past 2 years, which is absolutely criminal because the guy, he's only had 6 career games with more than 8 targets. In those games, he's had 151 yards in a tutty. He's had a touchdown every single one of these games. 151, 114, 112, 101, 83, 82 yards. Like he just has not missed. Reminds me of Calvin Ridley and honestly Chris Godwin. Like that's the one of the trends we've had over these past few years where it's like the hyper efficient rising third year receiver that benefits from a lot of vacated targets. And we've been lucky enough to have it be Godwin and then Ridley where we can get these guys, in the 3rd round. They were kind of, everyone's, sleeper wide receiver that wasn't actually a sleeper. And they were already, boasting this top 20 ADP. A.J. Brown happens to be going in the top 5 or 6, but he checks all those boxes, man. I think this, again, he's just going to really has that overall wide receiver 1 in his potential range of outcomes. The only other guys I have in his tier other than Adams are Tyreek, Diggs, and Hopkins.
Yeah, and that's the thing in Dynasty where you want to try to locate those next guys, check the talent, check the situations, and trade ahead of time. I traded last year. Now I have them on 11 of my 13 teams, and I couldn't be happier. We'll try to get to some of those guys later. Let's move to tier 4. This is like the really interesting one, right? You've talked about Fitzpatrick. I love Fitzpatrick. I know, Mung released an article about Fitzpatrick, and then you got the rookies, right? Fields, Lance, and Lawrence. I mean, all 4 of these guys have QB1 potential. I mean, you could say they could easily be in the top 10, and I wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah, I mean, particularly once Lance and Fields can get out there, I would say, gun to my head, I would take Fitzpatrick over these guys. I mean, he's just guaranteed to be on the field longer. And really, all the evidence we have in recent years tells us that he's going to be, a QB1 when he's out there. In 2018, he was the QB1 while Jameis was suspended weeks 1 through 3. He was only behind Lamar in weeks 7 through 17 in 2019 once he took over from Josh Rosen. And last year, before he, quote unquote, lost the job to Tua in weeks 1 through 6, he was the QB8. So we just don't have any evidence of Fitzpatrick not being a top 8 QB really since his Jets days. So, look at this offense: McLaurin, Curtis Samuel. I think it's schemed well enough for Scott Turner. You got the running backs to throw to as well. Logan Thomas, Diami Brown, all the weapons available for Fitzmagic to put together a great year. So the big one for me is, when is Trey Lance going to get out there? Because the more I think about it, the more I do think he deserves to be the rookie QB1, because he's the guy that just projects to kind of have 12 to 15 rush attempts per game, potentially. I mean, our PFF draft guide comp for Trey Lance was Taysom Hill with legit arm talent. So, again, just like we were talking about with Jalen Hurts, you don't even need to be a good real-life QB yet to be a great fantasy one, and Trey Lance might be able to do that as early as this year if he's entrusted with that starting job, with some sort of a sense of urgency.
Yeah, and I feel like Justin Fields is a similar type situation. I mean, the last time we had a quarterback play the entire year for them, and in a situation like this with Nagy, obviously, was Trubisky finished as QB10. I saw some people say, that's in the range of outcomes if Fields starts, because he's got that rushing upside. Mung, I know you're chomping at the bit. I know these are your guys in there. Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know my Trey Lance love with that rushing upside. I don't think that, the number one overall quarterback is outside of his range of outcomes, depending on when he starts. Personally, I'm not a Fitzpatrick guy. I mean, I'm just nervous about the turnovers, right? To me, Washington just wants that guy who can run the offense. They've got a top 5 defense. So my only concern with him is if he can hold on to the ball, because
who's going to take the job, though?
I'm a Taylor Heineke fan.
Oh my goodness.
We talk about this on the regular, so I was just giving him a hard time. He had the meme out there where we're all trying to make Ryan Fitzpatrick fetch, trying to do the mean girl thing there. I love that, by the way, Mung. I love the sense of humor coming out, and you're nailing it.
Yeah, I mean, look, all I'll say is, as a Tom Brady fan, I was nervous during that Washington game because of how well Taylor Heineke was playing. So I'm just saying that I think there's a fair chance that he could take that job.
Our man, for whom the bell tolls, just said, hey, what's up? Let's talk about our next tier. And this is the one where I just want you to pick out one of the guys. So tier 5, realistic path to success, but not bulletproof, right? I mean, you got Winston, you got Cousins, Tua, Darnold, Wentz, Wilson, Jones, Roethlisberger, Carr, Goff. They're all in there, right? If you had to pick one guy, again, out of this group to emerge that could be a top 12 quarterback, who's that guy in 2021?
Probably Cousins out of this group. I think he did finish QB 12 last year, so not, exactly something he hasn't pulled off over the years. But, the Vikings defense, I think, will be better. That's why he's in this tier, and I have Tannehill and Russ higher. I'm more confident in Mike Zimmer. But, you look at what Cousins has done. He's a really freaking good quarterback. Unfortunately, he hasn't been as good in fantasy with the Vikings because, he used to run for 4 or 5 touchdowns per year with Washington, and we just have not gotten that in Minnesota. But God forbid we just get a little bit of a positive regression in that area. And, I think he's got the weapons in place. Jefferson, Thielen, Irv Smith, Dalvin. We've seen them have a lot of success through the air. Last year, the problem was the defense couldn't hold it up. So I did a look at just the biggest difference last year in points per game and points per game allowed. And the 3 teams with the really just extreme differences in their offense being great and their defense sucking were the Titans, the Raiders, and the Vikings. So Cousins, their offense was not the problem last season. I know he sometimes shrinks in the Monday night games and all that, even if he did get one win, I think, last year at some point. But hey, guys, he's been a really good quarterback by pretty much any measure of success you want to look at. And, it's one of those things where, he lost against the 49ers, so he can't win the big one. Hey, he won the big one the previous week. It always comes back in the next round, the next game. It's pretty hard to win these days unless you're, taking home the Lombardi trophy. So Kirk Cousins, very good real life quarterback that could certainly also be in that same category in fantasy again in 2021.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. He's the guy that you're not like bragging to your friends. He's so vanilla. He's the missionary position of the quarterbacks. It's there. You know what I mean? He's just that guy. Let's move on to the running backs here. If we're in a one quarterback league, I mean, is there anybody you take 101 other than Christian McCaffrey? I've been trading for him in Dynasty. There's started to be like a window here where people are acting like he's not Superman aside from his injury. And last year he was actually on pace to have more points per game. I know it was only, over a 4-game stretch. But, I mean, is there anybody else you could even consider?
Nah, because we saw in the new offense, I mean, that first week one, I think he had a 97, it might have been 100% snap rate. Like, no one else plays that role. And the fact that he's going to be projected for 100-plus targets again, no one else has that going for them either. Not even Alvin Kamara with Drew Brees out of the picture. So, to me, like, it's always been a differentiator. Like McCaffrey has like pretty much the every down rush and target role. Nobody else has that in the league other than maybe Saquon if he's fully healthy, but we're already kind of hearing he could be a little bit limited to start. I'm not really buying those reports. I think if he's out there, he's going to be getting the ball 20 plus times a game, more weeks than not. So not overly worried about Saquon, but I think CMC is outright RB1. But it is funny how, the worst subset of Twitter is injury predictor Twitter. And like McCaffrey just misses all of last season. It doesn't matter. But Joe Mixon misses last year. And everyone's just like, wow, not falling for this again. Got me last year. Like really screwed over my teams. Can't be having that again. So, apparently McCaffrey, Saquon, we don't care about the injuries. But for Mixon, Chris Carson, they definitely matter like way more. So you got to stay with the times. Stay with what the kids are doing, I guess.
Injury Twitter is the worst. They're like saying Dalvin Cook doesn't get injured. I'm like, did you forget about that? They're like, oh, well, Joe Mixon. You're like, no, man. Like those guys played more, and it's so difficult to predict. Don't tell Steffi Smalls that Barkley might not, be in full gear right off the bat. But I mean, I feel like Saquon definitely gives you that same kind of ceiling week in and week out. The other guys that you have in tier one, Dalvin Cook, absolute workhorse, and Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry, I don't think there's a guy that in Dynasty that you can get cheaper that's going to get 300 carries, 1,400 rushing yards, double-digit touchdowns, and every year people are like, well, the workload. He's a bigger guy. He's going to break down. He doesn't catch a lot of passes. And what does he do every year? He comes out the last 3 years, he just keeps getting better, and those numbers just keep improving. And I see you're one of the only ones that has him up in this tier above Kamara, and I love it.
Again, it's like I understand we need to consider regression with these things, but there's nothing about his situation that really tells us that it's going to be worse this year unless we just want to think that he's finally going to be over the hill and he's going to break down. I'll tell you what, I mean, I don't want to put too much stock into the Twitter workout videos, but that doesn't look like a guy that's on the verge of breaking down to me, man. Maybe these more physical running backs in the year 2021 can last a little bit longer than they have in the past. So I'm looking at his contract right now, though, and really he's going to be there for sure this year, likely next year. 2023 would be the first time where, if he's really kind of falling off, they might want to consider getting rid of him. So, how long of a window do you really want to have in Dynasty? Like, that's one of the things, as someone that doesn't focus, my entire career on Dynasty, but I just kind of noticed from the outside that, it seems like a lot of times people almost have like too long of a timeline with this. Like if you can get 2 or 3 more great years out of Derrick Henry, like what else are you looking for? Like that's fantastic. The guy's going to be a top 5 running back. So here's to hoping he can just catch, some level of passes, man. Like the fact that they were taking him off the field last year for Jeremy freaking McNichols for like extended stretches. Like we're not asking for Derrick Henry to catch even 50 balls, but like 20, 30? 25, 30. Like, yeah. Come on. Like, just get him the ball in open space, man.
He's always a threat. He's always a threat to take it to the house. I mean, every year there's that one dump off he takes for 80 yards. You know what I mean? Like, and you're like, why don't we do that more often? Give him an opportunity. Because it's if the receiving game was in there, even if like old school Leonard Fournette with the Jaguars, if we can get him 40, 50 receptions. I mean, could you imagine the type of season that we're looking at? And people are they're discounting him a little bit more in Dynasty than they are in Redraft. Mung, anything else with Dalvin or anything else to add there with tier 1 before we move into tier 2, where I know you had some questions?
No, I mean, personally, I'm one of those people who is lower on Derrick Henry. When we were talking about Ryan Tannehill, we kind of touched on it where the Titans defense is really pretty rough looking in the secondary. And, I think Indy's gotten better. Jacksonville, I think offensively at least, will be better. So I could see a lot more high scoring games where potentially the Titans are going to be playing a little bit more from behind. So the lack of receptions does scare me a little bit about Henry. I think he's an outlier, so I'm not going to predict any injury for him. I think the workload will be there for him on the ground. I'm just not sure, I'm banking on him in that top 5 elite tier for me.
I like it. Moving to your tier 2, it's firm RB1 seasons. I mean, Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb. I'm going to start with Zeke. That's a guy that Mung and I have been buying up everywhere, and where people are, when he played last year in the games with Dak, he was a top 5 running back. People are acting like Zeke is washed because of that situation. I mean, out of this group, he's one of those guys that I could see clearly being in that top, 4 or 5 right this season.
He's another guy. He's right there with Derrick Henry, where it's like, all right, which thing that we don't have any actual research on do you want to side with? Do you want to say he's going to get injured because of his workload, or do you want to say that he's actually injury proof because he hasn't gotten injured before? So,
well, we say that all the time, right? It's like we tell ourselves narratives. You tell yourself a narrative of, and that's all we're doing sometimes at this point in the years, and that's why we're bringing you on. Is in Dynasty, we like to tell ourselves narratives. Sometimes, I see a lot of people like, they didn't like Zeke until they traded for him. They got a trade offer, and then they're like, oh, yeah, no, Zeke's going to do this. And Mung and I have been talking for a while that we really think this is a great year for Zeke. He's a nice buy low. And, I gave up Chase Claypool in a late first to get him today, and I'm okay with that, because I think in a points per carry league, Zeke is right up there at the top.
He was the PPR RB9 last year with the worst offensive line he's going to play behind, and without Dak Prescott. That was your worst case. So, I'm sorry that he wasn't the RB3. He wasn't Dak the entire season. But this idea that he was just completely horrendous, at least in fantasy football, man. I get it. He's making $90 million. You want him to be a top 3, if not the single best running back in the league for that sort of money. But once he got those fumbles out of his system after that weird first half stretch, there really were some good moments. And again, this was an offense led by Andy Dalton and, this other collection of quarterbacks for a few weeks that just couldn't do anything, man. So it wasn't like Zeke was the sole reason they couldn't get the ball moving. So he did come back after that injury and actually set our single season for 2020, at least, just the high marking, forced missed tackles in that Eagles game on the ground. So he did have some stretches where he looked more than fine. And more than anything, he's the featured bell cow workhorse on what we all figured to be a top 5 offense. And I love Tony Pollard. You love Tony Pollard. The Cowboys will continue to feed Ezekiel Elliott. Even after that game against the 49ers, Zeke came back from injury, still got his, usual 20 touches. So here's the hook. Yeah.
Yeah, don't get me started on Tony Pollard Twitter, because you see it like 2 or 3 times a day that Tony Pollard's a better running back than Zeke, and you're like, just keep your information. We're definitely not going there. One guy that a lot of our listeners have some trepidations with, and Mung was advocating selling him last year, and it was cashing out. Are we going to see a regression with Alvin Kamara? I mean, what are you seeing? Obviously, if Jameis Winston takes over, what are we thinking with Alvin Kamara, and what kind of ceiling and floor?
Yeah, I mean, look, he was a low-end RB1 for the most part when Taysom Hill was under center last year. I get the most shit about Alvin Kamara and Jonathan Taylor whenever any of these running back rankings go out, and they are both fantastic players, very well 2 of the top 5 running backs in the league. But we're not worried about that. We're worried about fantasy football. And in Taysom's 4 starts last year, Kamara was the RB26, the RB36, the RB6, and the RB9. So yeah, I'm technically being generous with this 4-game sample size, ranking him where he is. They give Latavius Murray as many handoffs. Okay, maybe a couple fewer per game, but he's never going to take over with his rushing workload, and now he's not going to probably get the receiving stuff from Taysom, or Jameis is going to be under center, and we got one of the highest average target depth guys in the league. I think it makes sense if this team isn't going to be a top 5 scoring offense going into next year. Hey, maybe they keep it going. Maybe Sean Payton is the answer, and it wasn't Drew Brees. But I just think there's a chance the touchdowns go down. It seems almost certain the targets go down. And yeah, so it's someone where, no, I'm not going to spend the usual top 5 pick on him because his situation is worse off. People are like, how can you fade, basically fade because I'm not going to be getting him where I'm kind of ranking him in a lot of these drafts. How can you do that with a guy that was just so good? Because his situation is different. Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry might have not have been quite as good as Kamara last year, but at least they're in almost better situations or the similar situation in terms of workload in Derrick Henry's case. So for me, Kamara, it just comes down to projecting what's going to happen in 2021, not what happened in the last 4 years.
Yeah, and in the rest of this group, there's two guys that stick out to me where you got to pay attention to your league settings. I mean, if you're not playing PPR and you're still in 1994, Nick Chubb definitely gets a bump. But if you are playing PPR, which you should be, I mean, seriously, at this point, Austin Eckler, to me, has the upside of, he's going to have the receptions right in that same class as McCaffrey, maybe slightly less. And, he's proven that he belongs in this category, and not everybody does. I mean, especially when you get into your redraft leagues with your buddies, from work, and they're like, Austin Eckler, that tiny, they haven't been on fantasy Twitter to see the dude's yoked. But, I love Austin Eckler. Talk to me a little bit about that before we move on.
Yeah, Eckler, I mean, I have him ranked ahead of Kamara. I think he's got the role that we hope Kamara still has right now in LA. And he actually has, the Saints old QB coach, Joe Lombardi, as his guy calling plays now. So Eckler was awesome last year. And the concerns we had for him have largely been cured. I mean, why were we kind of off on Austin Eckler last year? Because it was either going to be Tyrod Taylor under center or a rookie we didn't know about. Turns out that rookie's one of the best first-year quarterbacks we've pretty much ever seen. So, Eckler, you just look at it, man. He played in 46 of 48 potential games from 2017 and 2019. It was a horrific hamstring injury he got last year. And he still came back to play, I believe, 10 games on the season as a whole. So, man, I just think that he's one of the most fantasy-friendly players in the game because other than McCaffrey, I don't know at running back who you could feel good about projecting for more receptions in the year 2021. So, yeah, Eckler is someone that if he had more of a stranglehold in the early down work, then I'd be confident moving him up. But even then, man, it might not matter because, again, a full point per reception scoring, Eckler might just have enough receptions to make up for it.
For sure. Tier 3 is a fun one. It's a big group. Again, we talk about Joe Mixon all the time. I see that you're always talking about Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon RB1 season. I mean, this is the year, right? This is the year we really want it. And then the other guys you have on there, I know we could talk about Mixon for quite a bit, but I mean, the other veteran on there is Chris Carson. And then we get a whole slew of sophomores, right? And this is what people want to listen to. People are asking us all the time, Mung, Dad, what's going on? I mean, Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson, Edwards-Helaire, Swift. Who's the guy? Who do we want out of this? We're hearing things, Antonio Gibson, CMC light. Jonathan Taylor's moved himself all the way into RB2, RB3 overall in dynasty type. Cam Akers blew up in the playoffs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Mung absolutely loves him, and he's getting disrespected. He finishes of RB13. He was right in that range. And then DeAndre Swift, if utilized, the sky is the limit. So break these guys down a little bit for us. Mung, I'm going to let you go first because Ian's probably getting a little tired from talking. But, I mean, Mung, talk to us a little bit about this group, and then we'll switch it over to you, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, maybe it's a cop-out answer, but that's why I like the tier-style ranking because you can make an argument for each and every single one of these guys. The debate that I've been hearing a lot, or I've been getting involved in a lot, I should say, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because everyone seems to think that Cam Akers and Jonathan Taylor are going to be, the workhorse guy in their respective backfield this year. And my question is, why not CEH, right? When you're looking at backfield competition, last year, Darrell Henderson got a lot of work before he got that high ankle sprain, and then Cam Akers took over in the playoffs. And then Jonathan Taylor really emerged over the second half of the season. But I would argue that Nyheim Hines and Darrell Henderson are better competition than Darrell Williams and the corpse of Jerick McKinnon here.
Yeah, and for you listeners, I mean, Mung and I have a little bit of a side bet, $20 to our favorite charity here. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be a better running back than Clyde Edwards-Helaire fantasy-wise. And we've been on Twitter, no one answers more trade questions when it comes to Dynasty than Mung and I. And that's the only one. We line up really well. But when it comes to Taylor or CEH questions, we're trying not to have a gif off. We're trying to just argue back and forth. Ian, talk to us a little bit about that class. The guy that really I'm starting to open up to, and I've been buying in Dynasty, and I feel like the sky is the limit, is Antonio Gibson. But talk to me about those other guys as well.
to me, Cam Akers deserves to be above the other second-year guys purely because, like, again, we talked about some McCaffrey. Nobody else in the league has McCaffrey's like every down role, assuming Saquon isn't thrust back at that immediately. If they want to treat Cam Akers like they treated Todd Gurley, he is going to have that role. I understand Henderson got hurt before the playoffs, but Akers was already starting to take that over before that high ankle sprain did come to fruition. So I think Akers is the best running back out there. Malcolm Brown is no longer there, causing problem in short yardage and receiving work. And yeah, like I get it. Henderson probably won't be completely out of the picture, but for me, Akers has the highest ceiling of the group, and we're chasing that because as great as Jonathan Taylor and Antonio Gibson might be, like I would allow that they're better than Cam Akers in real life, but Naeem Hines is going nowhere. J.D. McKissick is going nowhere. Like I hear the Ron Rivera quotes. He called Antonio Gibson a bigger version of CMC with his skill set before last season, and they threw J.D. McKissick over 100 targets. I hope it's not the case. And I know when McCaffrey was there, they kind of eased him into the full featured role his second year as well. But it's asking a lot, man. I don't think McKissick is going completely out of the picture. You know, depending on kind of the Washington football team beat reporter you ask, I think we kind of hear some of that same sentiment echoing as well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, yeah, I mean, I definitely think he is going a little bit undervalued. It's funny. I was looking at some of the biggest ADP droppers from last year, like top 24 backs before last season. Where are they now? And like only 4 guys had like double-digit drops in ADP from the top 24. I think it was Kenyon Drake, James Conner, and one other guy that changed teams. I can't forget. But they all changed teams, and it was very clear, except for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was like, I think, 4th in the NFL in touches before they traded for before they signed Le'Veon Bell. And now he's out of the picture. So they can bring someone back, but even in that case, we're still looking at the lead RB1 who was good last year. He maybe wasn't, taking over. He wasn't the top 5, top 6 RB he was being drafted at when the season started. But, I think people are just penalizing him a little bit too much when he was actually pretty solid last year. Like that illness and, the eventual really nasty lower body injury he had were the bigger issues than Le'Veon Bell.
You guys heard it there. I'm seeing you on Twitter all the time. Cam Akers RB1 season. Lock it up. Just so you guys, we run 2 Smash Accept listener leagues. I got Cam Akers in both of them. Start trading, guys. Let's move over to the wide receivers. I feel like we're trying to keep that time constraint with you, and I would wish we could talk all night, but because you're absolutely killing it. Let's talk to the huge target tier 1 guys, Davante Adams, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Diggs, and Hopkins. You got to be happy getting any of those guys there. We've already kind of talked a little bit about Davante Adams. We've talked about A.J. Brown. The one guy that I'm not seeing everybody have in there, and I'm a Bills. I absolutely love the Bills. How can you not love Stephon Diggs?
Yeah, I mean, nobody had more targets than the guy last year, and that's ultimately what we're trying to predict. So, yeah, Diggs absolutely needs to be in that category. I mean, he caught at least 6 passes in all but one game. If you just want to look at his worst overall performances, he went 449-1 against the Rams, scored a touchdown on Jalen freaking Ramsey, had 7 catches and 39 yards against the Chargers. I mean, he acts and is one of the game's single best wide receivers. So he deserves to be in that top tier for me. And yeah, guys, I mean, I see Tyreek Hill. I think actually has the highest ADP now out of the group. I would go AJB over Devontae once Rodgers is traded, but I'm not even too afraid of Devontae. If Rodgers is traded, I would drop him down out of this tier, probably more into the, wide receiver 7 to 9 range. But this guy was still a PPR wide receiver 12 when Brett Hundley had to come under center in 2017. I think it's reasonable to hope Jordan Love is a little bit better than Brett Hundley, and Davante Adams in 2021, I think is better than Davante Adams was in 2017. He still, has, with health, the potential to have a target total starting with a 2 when it's all said and done. We wouldn't have the great quarterback throwing him the ball like these other players in the tier do, but, him alongside, Michael Thomas, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, I think would be appropriate still.
Yeah, and in Dynasty, we're having a lot of questions where guys are like, I got to sell Davante Adams, and they're trying to get out, and they're moving themselves outside that top 12 in a lot of situations. And this is that high risk, high reward where if you're a win now team and you get Davante Adams and Rodgers does come back, you're looking at a top 3 guy. And like you said, if he doesn't, you're looking outside, fringe top 12. The next 3 you have is the overall wide receiver 1 outcome is there, right? It's Michael Thomas, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, those guys get peppered. I mean, Michael Thomas is the one that I catch the most flack on, where I'm trying to say Michael Thomas has that top ceiling. Last year we were advocating trading for him, and obviously he didn't quite put it all back together after Breeze was gone. But the talent is still there. Are you believing some of this Jameis Winston can't throw the slant, this and that kind of stuff?
It's been a long day on Twitter arguing with people about this. First of all,
right? It's all over the place. And I'm like, if I say I like Jameis Winston or that I think Michael Thomas is going to have a good season, I get torn apart.
Michael Thomas played 7 games last year. He badly sprained his ankle after week 1. He comes back, and his starting quarterback's gone, and he still managed to have over 100 yards in 2 of the freaking games with Taysom Hill under center. What did he do in 2019 when Drew Brees got hurt? He put up big numbers with Teddy Bridgewater under center. I think we can all agree Teddy and Taysom are mediocre quarterbacks, like at best, and it didn't matter because Michael Thomas is a very good to great NFL receiver. And then people are just penalizing, what he scored. He had 5 catches, 73 yards, and a tutty against the Bears in the first round of the playoff. Goose eggs in the second round. Alvin Kamara had 20 total yards in that second game. That's pretty shitty. We hear nobody hold that against him. It wasn't great that he goose egg. No, I get it, but that's not a reason not to draft the guy in fantasy. And the whole slant boy stuff is just, it's overblown. First of all, like, what? Are we trying to say that he can only run the slant? Like, just even if he could, you're telling me he ran one route all the way to get the freaking single season reception record? Like, I've always used the one thing. Like, nobody says Steph Curry should shoot fewer threes. At PFF, like, we have every single route data, and he is not like, okay, he gets the most yards on slants. He's number 1 out of 145 qualified receivers since coming into the league in yards per route run on slants. Like, they should be throwing him that ball on slants because, 1, they haven't had a quarterback that can throw the ball more than 30 yards in the air over the past 2 years. And 2, Thomas is awesome at it, but he's also number 2 on comebacks and hitches. He's number 6 on ins, posts, and crossing routes. I mean, he's 41st out of 130 guys on outs and corners. Like, he comes through on everything, but we just choose to, for some reason, slander this guy because he's too good on one specific route. So honestly, I hope Jameis Winston wins the job. So for once, we can see Michael Thomas actually have a quarterback that can push the ball downfield. Everyone wants to hate on Jameis now, and all these reports coming out. The guy threw for 5,000 yards 2 years ago, so you can call him inaccurate and he's an erratic gunslinger. I get it, but give me a break. I got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans going. Like, people go, if Taysom Hill's under center, Michael Thomas would be okay. Listen to yourself. Like, do you understand what you're saying now? Taysom Hill, like, anybody can be under center, and Michael Thomas is going to ball out because he's that good. So give the man a break.
I don't want to be the first guy in history to say Jameis Winston's a smart quarterback, but he knows how to, attack the defense. And before Godwin was there, Godwin's rookie year, he peppered Mike Evans because he knew that was his way to get it done. He's playing in that contract era, and he is now. And what else is there other than Michael Thomas? He's going to force feed him the ball, and he's going to throw his share of pick sixes, but it could be a fun offense to watch still. Tier 3 with the alpha wide receivers, that you have a lot of guys in the same offense. You have some things there where you have, or in that similar area, you got Justin Jefferson, McLaurin, Cooper, Lamb, Ridley, Julio, Deontay, and Allen Robinson. Now, I know one guy you've been talking a lot about and interested in is Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I'm just not quite as high, so I would love to hear Ian talk a little bit about Deontay Johnson. My only concern with him is that I do think that Pittsburgh is going to run a lot more than they did last year. They were the second most pass-heavy team with Connor Hurts. They really relied on their passing game almost as an extension of that short run, the slants, the quick little passes instead of running the ball. And so, with the total target share to shrink a little bit, I don't know that Pat Freiermuth's going to get a ton of targets as a rookie, but, maybe steal some of those outlet targets. I just think that Johnson's target volume is going to go down this year.
Yeah, it can't go up much more. Guy had 160 targets in 16 full games last year. And that's not even, like, I'm not even jumping through the hoops where he was injured in like 3 of those games. And we can take away week 17 where, he only had 4 targets from Mason Rudolph. 160 targets last season. I understand he dropped more of them than anybody else. But else had a bunch of, else had double-digit drops, DK Metcalf, and nobody really seems to care about that because we know that drops are not an indictment on a receiver being bad. They're really a reality of when a guy gets open enough to drop that many passes. So you can look back at the drop leaders at any single year, and you're going to see a long list of really great receivers. So I won't go through the time to list off all those, but to me, I do think they'll change the offense a little bit, like definition of insanity, same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So yeah, I would hope that they do change it up and not, pass quite as often as they did last year, try to get something going on the ground, at least pass more efficiency. Would it kill you guys to do some play action? It was a joke how far they were in last place last year. But Deontay, man, he's flashed the ability to really win at all areas of the field. I think he can go down the field, short and intermediate. He's their wide receiver one. He was it last year. So even if it goes from 160 to 140, 130, I think he has the sort of, ability to be a more efficient receiver and make the most of them.
So in Dallas, when we had Dak in there, we talked about Zeke already in that effect, and you had Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb both in the top 12, during weeks 1 through 5. In Dynasty, sometimes people are always, hey, that price is too much. CeeDee Lamb has not even come close to his ceiling for value or what he's able to do. If Amari Cooper were to go down, CeeDee Lamb is a guy that I feel like jumps into the tier above. The talent on this guy is phenomenal.
Yeah, it was pretty damn good already. With Dak under center, CeeDee was the wide receiver 11 in weeks 1 through 5. First 5 weeks of his career, and we have, the whole COVID offseason didn't even matter for CeeDee. He was already balling out, and he just looked like so skinny out there, man. Like, I feel like this guy, he's gonna just, I think, grow into his body a little bit more and probably just, flash some more of that, yak ability we saw at Oklahoma at the next level. So I think he already started to improve as the year went on last year. Like, that was just my kind of takeaway early on in the season when he was playing with Dak. A lot of it was just him running out of the slot, just almost running the free grass down the seam, and they were making a lot of great plays. But like you said, he hasn't even scratched the ceiling of what he's capable of, particularly with someone like Dak Prescott now all the way locked down. So yeah, where do you guys have him in Dynasty? Because to me, the top spot is between AJ Brown and Justin Jefferson, but CeeDee's got to be right there with DK Metcalf, maybe some other guys I'm not thinking of, also in that conversation.
I'm definitely moving him up. I've had Brown as the one, and you gotta have Metcalf up there. But CeeDee Lamb has the ceiling to be right up there with AJ Brown, in my opinion. Like, if we see, a 1,400-yard, 10-plus touchdown season from him this year at his age, you got to put Jefferson, Brown, and him in a class of their own, because these other guys, your Hopkins, Hopkins, Adams, all these guys, they're getting into that age cliff of 29, and that's, we all know in Dynasty, in redraft, that's fantastic. It doesn't matter. That's they're in that prime from 26 to 29. But in Dynasty, they write them off for dead, and kind of push them off and keep pushing that value. Mung, I have Lamb right now as my wide receiver 5. Where do you have him?
I actually have him at 4, one spot above Justin Jefferson. So I'm pretty high on him as well.
Yeah. And the thing is, I'm getting questions all the time. People are like, should I do, some of them are absolutely crazy to me, but they're like, should I do Michael Pittman in a first? It feels like an overpay. I'm like, go do it. Just go do it. People are like, they're asking questions. Should I do Juju in a second? I'm like, what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing on Twitter is they're not valuing Lamb high enough, and we talked about it with AJ Brown. Last year, I was doing this everywhere where I was moving down. I was giving, DeAndre Hopkins for AJ Brown in a first. And now look where that is, and now we're in a spot where if you can do that with DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, and get CeeDee Lamb plus for a contender, the dude is going to ball out. The ceiling is phenomenal. So I always talk about CeeDee Lamb. I absolutely love him. One guy that Twitter loves, and let's talk about it because it is in Atlanta. Calvin Ridley is a Twitter darling. But if Julio Jones goes, do we see this more as like a Juju and Antonio Brown kind of separation? Do we see this as a way that Twitter's most beloved person in the world, Kyle Pitts, emerges as that number 2? Break it down. If Julio leaves, what can we expect in Atlanta?
I think he's a fantasy wide receiver 1 with or freaking without him. His stats are actually more wild without Julio in favor. Like, I think the argument was more like kind of making it, when they are going to play, because Ridley did boom almost like a lot more when Julio was kind of hobbled last year. So really, with Julio active, Ridley in those 5 games, I scored 1. He had 2 games with 2 touchdowns, and then the only game he didn't score, he went over 100 yards. So look, he is just, his air yards were so far ahead of other guys. It was almost comical proportions of last year. So he's always balled whenever he's had, even like 8 targets in a game. He's going to continue to have that all the way. So, yeah, I mean, taking away Julio, will really be quite as efficient? Probably not. But to me, the Juju stuff, like in 2019, we saw the Steelers have like the worst group of quarterback play we've ever seen. We've just kind of gone through the issues with Roethlisberger as well. And the biggest issue with me and for Juju is like he doesn't even look like the same guy almost out there. Like what happened to the dude that took that crosser like 80 yards against the Patriots, like almost scoring, just like one of the bigger yak monsters in the league. So more defensive attention, certainly can play a role. I get it, but Juju just doesn't seem like the same athlete. I'm not anticipating that sort of drop off from Ridley, even though he's older. Like again, I think Juju's been playing hurt a little bit more than people might give it credit for. He was popping up pretty much every single week last year with a knee injury. And, so is A.J. Brown. And even if Juju didn't have that, same success and didn't have the same offseason surgery, I would like to maybe see him get back to looking like the explosive guy we saw really not take over the league, but make a hell of a lot of great plays here his first 2 years.
Yeah, he was on that wide receiver 1 in dynasty mentality. I mean, I know a guy's DLF, Ryan McDowell had him up there at number 1 for a while. As I'm looking at your tier 4, I'm looking at myself, and we didn't really talk a lot about philosophy, and I know we're getting close, but I absolutely smashed the running back in that first round because of and maybe even in the second round because of positional scarcity and what I see in tier 4. I mean, we're talking Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Tyler Lockett, Woods, Kupp, Chase, Higgins, Boyd, Smith, Moore, Thielen, Galladay, Beckham. It's loaded, and they're so deep at that wide receiver position. How do you usually attack the first, 2 rounds in a 1 quarterback fashion?
Yeah, that's why if I can get 2 of my top 10 or 12 even running backs, I think I'm going to do it a lot of times because I just love this tier right down here. So yeah, I mean, I think the days of pure 0 RB are over. If you want to only go 1 and then start scooping up receivers, that's fine. But it's just hard for me to get to round 6 or 7, without a single RB. So the whole, premium RB or whatever, like that's fine. Cause I mean, this group is just awesome. Like Tyler Lockett last year, like worst 100 catch, 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown season ever. People got too mad because, he he condensed his performance to a few weeks and just warn you the whole damn week every time. So, these Rams guys, you mentioned before, you're high on Matthew Stafford. I am as well. Woods and Kupp should be eating those targets. No reason to expect a major drop off there. The Bengals is kind of like, a middle-class man's version of the Cowboys over there in the AFC. Talked about Devontae Smith. DJ Moore, I'm a little concerned about. Sam Darnold. I actually have him a bit lower than consensus. And I just think, I've gotten a lot more Robbie Anderson because it's going to be a lot closer between those guys. As much as I love DJ Moore, I mean, he was one of the more unlucky receivers, I think, in the league last season, him and Jerry Jeudy in terms of quarterback play. I just don't really expect it to improve with Darnold.
And I've seen this on Twitter for you a couple of times as well, is I'm seeing now Tyler Lockett was a great point. I'm seeing him go for 2nd-round picks in Dynasty. People are like, hey, I'll give you a second and a toss in. The other guy that I'm starting to see, believe it or not, as like add-ins to trades to make it done, just to sweeten it up, add a little bit of flavor, is Odell Beckham. I mean, they're selling out way too early.
I mean, right now, and people are saying, like, I'm never going back to Odell Beckham. I'm done with him and this and that. Like, no, now he's the cheapest ever. Now you can actually buy him at his floor instead of his ceiling. He's going as the wide receiver 29. He was the wide receiver 19 before he got hurt last year. And even in the disappointing 2019 season, he was the wide receiver 25. So I really don't see how, unless he just gets hurt again, which would be unfortunate, him failing to come through as at least, a borderline wide receiver 2. And I still firmly believe the best version of Baker Mayfield and the best version of OBJ equals a wide receiver 1 in fantasy land. So spare me the Browns are better off without OBJ bullshit. They're better off with Baker running the offense as it's, designed to do, throwing to the, player that the coverage dictates and all that. And Odell Beckham will be a coverage shifter because he is better than Rashard Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Daryl Hodge. And it is still ridiculous to me that we need to explain that at certain times. I understand the splits from last year, but look at the Browns games in the first 6 weeks. Like, they scored 30 points against everyone other than the Ravens and Steelers. We act like they just couldn't do anything until Beckham got hurt. Clearly, the Browns aren't worried about it. I think they passed more in Stefanski's second year there with Baker. And again, just we want to buy players at their floor versus their ceiling. I'm sure that's, a big strategy when you're trying to trade as well. So do so with OBJ.
I love it. Mung had a question here, and we're running a little bit short on time, so we're going to do rapid on this one. But you have a lot of in tier 5. You have a lot of guys on the same team, right? So we're going to just rapid fire. I'm going to say the guys. You tell me which one if you had to choose one out of those two. So tier 5, you have Ayuk and Debo.
Ayuk, I think he's better, even if Debo probably is more QB independent.
Mung?
Yeah, it's Ayuk for me as well.
All right, let's move to Jacksonville. We're going to go Chark or Shenault.
Chark, as much as it pains me, we got to listen to Urban at some point. It's ETN for the Percy role, not Visca.
Mung, agreed?
Times 2.
All right, let's see if we can get the trifecta here. Jalen Waddle or Will Fuller?
I think it's Waddle, top, number 6 overall pick. I mean, the way they were able to kind of get Lynn Bowden some touches, I think it's going to be Waddle on steroids, and he can obviously do far more than that down the field. So I love me some Will Fuller, but I just think with the capital involved, it makes more sense for Waddle to be the featured guy, Fuller to be the, still 80, 90 targets, but more of a field stretching type guy.
That's the third check right there, Mung, for sure. Will Fuller, maybe in best ball, we'll consider it a little bit. Ian, we said we'd keep you to that 1 hour mark. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, this has been a blast. I mean, this has been, in Dynasty, we're talking a lot more strategy. This was just a lot of fun talking about what's going to happen here, and I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell everybody, where they can find you again? If you guys aren't following him on Twitter, you should be. I mean, it's witty, fantastic humor, and great content. You can't beat it.
I appreciate you guys. This was fun. Catch me on Twitter at iHeart. It's PFF.com, the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. My really goal at the moment, I'm doing 100 articles in 100 days, also converting those 2 podcasts. So we got Fantasy Files out every day, article out every day, plenty of goodness in between. Very blessed to be able to do this full time, and I'm trying to help all the listeners, all the followers make some money and have some fun as well. So thanks again for having me on, dudes.
Love it. And Mung, I know you got some other things going on. What's going on with you? And let everybody know where they can find your work right now.
Yeah, I mean, love all of Ian's takes here. We had a few disagreements, but overall, I think, he's a super smart guy. But you can find my rankings over at Fantrax. And it's great to see Ian's face because I just found out a couple weeks ago, my girlfriend's like, no, that's Johnny Depp. I don't know who you're talking to on Twitter. So I just realized about his profile picture, but Ian, it was great to have you on, man.
I am unfortunately not that good looking. I've had a few people slide into my DMs where they're like, hey man, I saw someone stole your Abby. Are you okay with that? I'm like, it's very okay. Just know that Hunter S. Thompson is the GOAT. That's the only message I want to spread.
I love it. Thanks again for tuning in and enjoy the process.